With Alex Jones back on the Twitter platform, aka X, it has brought about another renewed, so to speak, discussion on the concept of freedom of speech and whether or not allowing certain types of rhetorics, discussions, or opinions on a platform is conducive to a modern society in the 21st century. And it's very interesting that we're having this conversation because now we're also talking about kind of like unbanning people like Nick Fuentes and anyone else within his field of, opinion. Basically, there's two sides of the discussion. There's the people who argue that certain types of opinions, thoughts, and voices should be banned or silenced completely because those opinions can lead to conspiracy theories and can lead to people taking action based on misinformation and rhetorics that could be harmful to society, while the other hand is arguing that despite those ill-founded opinions, all freedom of speech should be allowed because by censoring certain types of opinions, you'll end up controlling the narrative, and then basically the idea is that if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. So it's better to just completely allow people to just say what they want to say and allow the consensus to decide what is true and what is not. For me personally, I feel like both sides have a point, but at the same time I feel like they're personally wrong because there is no such thing as freedom of speech. Freedom of speech has never existed in the entirety of human history. It never has and it never will. Even Elon Musk, who's trying to turn Twitter into X, this ultimate platform where all opinions are valued, all opinions are allowed to be spoken, he has shown a tendency to lean to a certain direction. He favors certain types of opinions, and as we can see, ever since he took over the platform, there has been a rise of basically all types of degenerate opinions. I've seen more comments of people really expressing their distaste for certain groups of people. I've seen more conspiracy theories against the Jewish community than I've ever seen before on that platform. I've seen so much more pop out ever since he took the platform. But at the same time, it makes me wonder that, although I'm seeing a lot more opinions like this available on the platform, one could also argue that these people have always held these opinions within themselves, and we've been living a delusional reality where we thought that we were making progress in terms of fights against racism and other types of discrimination. All we did was put a bandage on a huge scar that was left behind for my predecessors. I personally think that although I don't really like to see those things on a platform, it is necessary to be aware that we have made little progress in our fight against these types of opinions. Going back to what I was saying, there is no such thing as freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, it has always been determined by the community, by our social groupings. I'll give you guys a very simple understanding. There are two houses. In one house, you are allowed to talk about apples. But in another house, that house has forbidden any discussions of Apple whatsoever. Now, some people will say, well, house number B is restricting my freedom of speech and I should be able to talk about apples wherever I want. But then there'll be other people who argue, well, although house A allows you to talk about apples, house B has their own rules and it's up to you to respect those rules or not. It is not for you to decide whether or not you should be allowed to talk about apples in house B's owner's location. This is how freedom of speech is operated throughout human society. It is not that everyone has a God-given right to speak their minds and to say what they want to say. It is basically society determining what is allowed and what isn't allowed, and it's a shifting dynamic that changes with time. 1 minute we used to be able to say the F word and throw it around completely without a care in the world. Now, in recent times, we have decided that word is no longer sufficient. It is harmful to certain groups of people, and we've decided to remove that from our vocabulary altogether. Now, in the near future, we could decide to bring back the F word, and once again decide it's not a big deal. We can say whenever we want. If people take offense to it, that's their problem, because we've created an environment that has allowed the F word to come back. I'm giving the F word as an example because the people who tend to use it the most are gamers, and I've heard that word thrown out a lot. I think that we are really navigating a very dangerous line of what we consider freedom of speech, because another thing that I've always noticed about people who advocate for freedom of speech are usually those who want to be able to say whatever they want to say without consequences, and that is virtually impossible. This is why, again, I've made the argument that there is no such thing as freedom of speech, because anytime you say anything of any sort of variety, anytime you've expressed any form of opinion, there will be oppositions to it. And depending on the type of opinion that you have spoken out, people will react differently. Some people will try to oppose your opinions with their own opinions, and you'll end up in something that's called a debate. Other people will find your opinion so drastically foul, so against their moral view of life, that they would like to take you out altogether. This has led to a variety of wars and battles throughout history. As I mentioned, this is why freedom of speech just doesn't exist. It's determined by society and by power. As you can see with Elon Musk as an example, he is exhibiting the power aspect. He wanted to create a platform where people can say whatever he wants people to talk about, which is why he bought Twitter and turned it into X. He used power to determine what can and cannot be allowed. Another example would be Reddit. Reddit used to be a platform where you could talk about a lot of different things, but as time went on, I suppose the community in Reddit, or I guess the moderators to be more precise, decided that they want to focus the types of opinions that is allowed on that platform. That's another form of power. Companies have decided that they want to be more inclusive, more diverse, and they want to make sure that everybody feels safe in their working environment. So they have exercised their power to ensure what can and cannot be said. Another form of power. Then obviously there's the social aspect where, although most people on the average day-to-day lives don't have the power to enforce these types of conditions, they can come together in a community and decide for themselves what can and cannot be said. That's the community social aspect. Controlling what can and cannot be said is going to be a difficult challenge. I don't think it's possible. I think at the end of the day, rules are made. Rules are needed to kind of define what can and cannot be said, because words do have power. I'm pretty sure if you're someone of African descent, you would have heard your parents say that words have power, and they really do. How you say things, what you say, can really influence and change your surroundings completely. Allowing someone like Nick Fuentes and Alex Jones back on that platform may seem like a step in the right direction in ensuring that people are able to express their opinions, but consequently, it may lead to a lot of people taking actions or have unintended consequences due to Alex Jones or Nick Fuentes coming back to the platform. As we've seen with a lot of mass shootings that has happened in America, and when we look at the manifestos of those people, they always refer to things like the replacement theory or types of discussions and rhetorics that is usually found in places like 4chan and other places that are very right-leaning places. And although the left's attempt to kind of over-police what can and cannot be said for the safety of those that they consider a marginalized community, what they've ended up doing is creating this bubble. And this bubble was just filled with the people's opinions that they had to repress over the years, just building up over time. And that is why when Elon Musk took over kind of Twitter and turned it into X, that bubble burst and showed the world what people truly believed. All the opinions about how they felt about the LGBTQ, how they felt about the left's actions and dealing with certain conditions, the lack of call out when certain groups of people were doing things that were going against the law, certain worries that weren't addressed. It all just manifested into this bickering between left and right. I don't know what to say, honestly. I'll stand by it. I don't think there's anything that is remotely close to freedom of speech. It's freedom of speech with conditions. That's how it's always been. You can say, even right now, even on YouTube, there are certain things you cannot say because YouTube as a platform has a right to determine what can and cannot be said. So sometimes you'll see people on the right side saying that YouTube is stifling my freedom of speech, or Twitter is stifling my freedom of speech, where it's like, no, YouTube is not a public platform per se. It's still a private company, if I'm not mistaken. Twitter, I don't know if Twitter was a public company at the time, but it had its own rules. It had its own terms of services that it implemented. Service of codes or whatever codes of conduct, I think is what it's called. They had all these rules in place, and they were the ones who decided what can and cannot be said. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see how this goes. For me, Alex Jones, I'm not gonna lie to you, he is an interesting figure. I don't agree with most of the things that he says, but technically speaking, he has the right to say those things. And now that Twitter has changed its leadership, he technically has the right to be on the platform. Whether we like it or not, he does. Nick Fuentes, I consider him the greatest enemy to my people, so I personally don't want him back on the platform by any means necessary. But I don't have the power to stop him, because even if you took him out of every single platform, which many people did over the past few years, it has never stopped him from working towards his agenda, and people like him are dangerous. So when I'm given the choice, I would rather be able to hear him speak his opinions, so I can understand what he's planning to some extent. I know he's not going to reveal everything, but hearing these ideas out more openly may hopefully change mostly my people's opinions about how they're carrying themselves, because I feel like personally we're too lax. We act as if racism is gone and that we can just fight any issues now. We're just shouting racism or whatever the case may be. No, there's gonna be a time now where we need to actually get our shit together, focus on obtaining our own forms of power. Let's be honest, we're very weak right now. Get our own form of power so we can protect ourselves. That's what I'm saying. Anyways, that's just my opinion on it. Let me know what you guys think. I think that, like I said before, there's no such thing as freedom of speech. There's no guaranteed freedom of speech. It's all conditioned by two things: the one who holds the power to decide what can and cannot be said, and the society, the community that allows what can and cannot be said within their group. So yeah, it is what it is. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.